Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Today we're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, Volume 3. We're at a transitional stage here. Srila Prabhupada will travel to 3 places today. He was at the Paradiso, Stinson Beach in San Francisco, recovering from his stroke. But the sun was not sufficient for him there because there was a big mountain range. The sun wouldn't come up until 11 o'clock in the morning, just for a little while, an hour or two, and then the clouds from the ocean would cover the sun again. So Prabhupada was not recovering well there, and he made a firm decision that he would return to India. So today Prabhupada will go from San Francisco to a short stop in New York City, then London, then Moscow, and finally to Delhi. And we want to invite the Russian devotees who have come here with Mandakini Mataji. There's going to be some translation today. Hare Krishna. So while Prabhupada was at the Paradiso in Stinson Beach, because of the winding road to go up the mountains, he couldn't come down to the temple. So 1 or 2 devotees would come to see Prabhupada. And Prabhupada decided that so many devotees were waiting for initiation by that time that he was going to perform the initiations at Stinson Beach. Prabhupada said that he would initiate the new followers in San Francisco and asked that they come one at a time and stay overnight. Without performing any fire ceremonies, he simply talked with each new person, asking him to follow the 4 rules and chant 16 rounds a day. When the follower promised, Prabhupada initiated him, sitting on the bed, while the disciple sat before him on the floor. Prabhupada would chant quietly on the disciple's beads, and then give him or her a spiritual name. One day, one of the new candidates for initiation came in very nervously and bowed down before Prabhupada. The boy didn't get up. "You can get up now," Prabhupada said. "So you want to be initiated?" The boy said yes and began chanting, not knowing what else to say. "I'll chant on your beads," Prabhupada said. After chanting for 10 minutes, he returned them, saying, "Your name is Aniruddha." "What does that mean?" the boy asked. "He's the grandson of Krishna. Do you have any questions?" Aniruddha couldn't think of anything. He had already forgotten his name, and Prabhupada said he could go. Later, Prabhupada called for Aniruddha, but Aniruddha didn't know that it was his name being called. "Aniruddha," Kirtananda said and looked at him. "Swamiji is calling you." Another boy who came out received the name Uddhava. Just a minute. The next day, as Prabhupada was sitting in the yard, he called, "Kirtananda, Upendra, Uddhava." He wanted to read them a verse he had encountered while studying Srimad Bhagavatam. Kirtananda and Upendra came and sat at Prabhupada's feet. "Oh, where is Uddhava?" Prabhupada asked. Upendra told him that Uddhava had gone up to the hills to look at the cows and chant to them. Upendra thought that Swamiji would be pleased to hear that his new disciple had climbed the hills just to chant to the cows. But Prabhupada shook his head unhappily. Restlessness. He had wanted the new boy to hear the verse. So this would also often happen when you were in the personal association and the personal service of Srila Prabhupada, you had to be there at your post at all times. So because Uddhava was just going to be there one night and one day, it was to be expected he would stay close to Prabhupada so he could get as much association as possible. The devotees, even Prabhupada's secretary, they would find it difficult to get their rounds chanted because they were so busy doing the services for Prabhupada. And one time a devotee, he went for a japa walk to the Krishna Balaram tree. And naturally Prabhupada called for him. And he was quite displeased to hear that he had left his post just to go for a japa walk. So this is the sacrifices that the cooks, the secretaries, the servants had to accept if they were going to be close to Srila Prabhupada. They had to be right there, ready for Prabhupada to ring that bell, to call them, to do the services that he required. So this is the sloka. This sloka was when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would come before Lord Jagannath on the Rath Yatra cart, he would chant this beautiful sloka. It comes from the Mukundamala. Jayati Jayati Devo Devaki Nandano So Jayati Jayati Krishna Vrishnivansi Pradipa Jayati Jayati Mega Shyamala Komalango Jayati Jayati Prithvi Bharanasho Mukunda. Prabhupada gave the translation. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was known as the son of Devaki. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the light of the Vrishni dynasty. That's the Vrishni Vansa Pradeep. That's when we offer Pradeep. So Shri Krishna is the light of that dynasty. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose bodily luster is like that of a new cloud, and whose body is as soft as lotus flowers. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who walks on the planet Earth to deliver the world from the scorn of demons, and who can offer liberation to everyone. After repeating the Sanskrit and the translation, he told them they could return to their duties. So this was the benefits of being close to Srila Prabhupada, as Prabhupada would be doing his translations or simply reading his books. Wonderful, wonderful slokas and realizations Prabhupada would share with the people, the devotees close to him. So later this particular sloka appeared in Chaitanya Charitamrita when Srila Prabhupada was translating that book as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing before Lord Jagannath at Rath Yatra. Prabhupada told Kirtanananda he had definitely decided to go to India via New York as soon as possible. Kirtanananda packed Swamiji's things and drove Swamiji down to San Francisco to spend the night at the temple. They would leave the next morning. The temple and even Prabhupada's apartment were very hectic that night, with many devotees and guests wanting to see Prabhupada and dozens of people wanting initiation. When Kirtanananda advised Prabhupada not to exert himself by going down for the evening program, Prabhupada insisted on at least going and sitting during the kirtan. So Prabhupada would often make snap decisions like this. Also when Prabhupada was ill here in India during his final pastimes, he had gone to Rishikesh to stay at a very nice house there on the Ganga. And suddenly one night he called his servant, Bhakti Swami, and said, I want to leave immediately. I want to go back to Vrindavan. They packed up. That night they came back. Unexpectedly, Prabhupada showed up here in Vrindavan. So again, Prabhupada, although he was comfortably there, he said there was nothing to complain about the beautiful bungalow or home that he had been staying in because of the lack of sunlight. He wasn't able to he wasn't able to recover as he had hoped to. So therefore, overnight, he drove there, and Prabhupada was going to spend that last night there with the devotees. When he entered the storefront, the devotees immediately stopped their kirtan, dropping down to offer obeisances. There was a hush. He commanded a new reverence. This might be the last time they would see him. They watched him during the kirtan as he played his kartals, singing with them for the last time. The uninitiated wanted to accept him as their spiritual master tonight, before it was too late. So at this time in ISKCON, Prabhupada was personally performing all of the initiations, one-on-one. Sometimes he would have group initiations, but Prabhupada would personally chant on the beads of the devotees. He would choose the names, and normally there would be a fire sacrifice, but in this circumstance, he said that he told the devotees that next time there's a fire sacrifice, you sit in that, because the Supreme Lord, the Vaishnavas, the spiritual master, and the fire should all be witnesses to the vows that we take at the time of initiation, that we follow the 4 regulative principles, and that we chant minimum 16 rounds every day. So now they didn't know if Prabhupada was going to return from India, because he was on the verge of leaving his body practically when he had this stroke. So those devotees, or those aspiring devotees who were there at the San Francisco temple, they were very anxious to get initiation before he went back to India. Srila Prabhupada asked for the microphone. No one had expected him to speak. Kirtanananda, the only person in a position to restrain him, said nothing and sat before him like the others, submissive and expectant. Prabhupada spoke quietly about his mission. Under the order of his spiritual master, he was bringing Lord Chaitanya's movement to America, and Krishna had kindly sent him so many sincere souls. I have a few children in India from my family days, he said, but you are my real children. Now I am going to India for a little while. So here Prabhupada was referring to his disciples and his followers as his children. Sometimes he would refer to them as his fathers and mothers because they were taking such good care of him. Everyone fixed his attention on Swamiji as he sat before them, leaning against the madras-covered wall. In this picture, the madras has been brought down. Speaking softly. You see, most of these pictures, we have an archive of 19,930 photos of Srila Prabhupada. And to try to find the right photo, it takes all week. So the closest I could find was the madras to the side of Srila Prabhupada here. Suddenly the door opened, and Rabindra Swarup unhappily entered. Rabindra Swarup was one of the first initiates from 26 Second Avenue. And he had followed Prabhupada to San Francisco and stayed there, but he was not following the principles. He was off different places, enjoying the music at the ballrooms and mixing with the hippies. So now suddenly on this last night when Prabhupada is here, Rabindra Swarup reappears in the temple. Everyone knew that Rabindra Swarup wanted to leave Krishna consciousness. He hadn't taken his initiation vows seriously. He wanted to move on. He didn't want a spiritual master anymore. The other devotees had discouraged him, but he had persisted. They were incredulous. How could he do such a thing on the night before Swamiji's departure? So, if you care to, there are other devotees who have now written their memoirs, such as Jamuna Devi. She describes from her perspective what happened, what she was feeling when Rabindra Swarup suddenly made his appearance on this last night. Rabindra Swarup fell to the, oh, this is not the Rabindra Swarup that's now actively serving in our ISKCON society. That Rabindra Swarup, Bill Deadweiler and his wonderful wife Sudamini, he was a GBC, he led the Philadelphia Temple for many years. So after Rabindra Swarup left the Association of Devotees, in 1971, Srila Prabhupada initiated a new devotee by the name of Rabindra Swarup. So there are two different Rabindra Swarups in ISKCON. Sometimes you'll find that Prabhupada would give two names, the same name to two different devotees. Rabindra Swarup fell to the floor to offer obeisances, but he didn't rise up. Instead, he began crawling on his hands and knees towards Prabhupada. Rabindra usually had a cavalier manner, enhanced by a handsome face, long tousled hair, and a beard. But now he was wretched and sobbing and crazy. He crawled toward Prabhupada, who sat but 2 steps off of the floor on the simple redwood dais. Prabhupada looked at him with compassion. "Come here, my boy." Rabindra crawled up the steps and placed his bushy head on Prabhupada's lap. Moved, the devotees watched as Prabhupada stroked Rabindra's head, and the boy cried and cried. "What's wrong, my son? You don't have to be so unhappy." Rabindra bawled out. "I want," he sobbed, to reach God directly, without anyone in between." Prabhupada continued to pat and stroke the boy's head. "No, you continue to stay with us if possible. Don't be a crazy fellow." Rabindra's weeping subsided, and Prabhupada continued speaking both to Rabindra and the emotion-struck group in the crowd. "I am an old man," he said. "I may die at any moment. But please, you all carry on this Sankirtan movement. You have to become humble and tolerant. As Lord Chaitanya says, be as humble as a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. You must have enthusiasm and patience to push on this Krishna-conscious philosophy." So Prabhupada was not planning to lecture. He simply wanted to take part in the last kirtan before he was leaving. But after this incident, he was inspired to inspire the entire group that this is a movement, and you have to stay within this movement and remain humble and tolerant. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Trinadapi Sunichena, Taror Iva Sahishnuna, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. That if we want to continue chanting Hare Krishna continuously, Kirtaniya Sadahari, we have to do so in a humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in street. One should be more tolerant than the tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Now, this aspiration to approach the Lord directly, this is also present in the Christian religion, which was very prominent in America at that time. The Catholic Church had a system of popes and bishops and priests, and the worshipers would take recommendation, take advice through this line of teachers. And then some of the Christians, the Protestants, many, many different types of Protestants, meaning they were protesting against this, that they didn't want people in between them and God. They wanted to have a one-on-one direct relationship with God. So here we have the first representation, and Prabhupada calls it impersonalism, because We knew nothing of Krishna until Srila Prabhupada came along. Even though so many people were reading and studying Bhagavad-Gita, no one was teaching that Krishna was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's only by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, the spiritual master, that we understand who Krishna is. So he is called the transparent via medium. He doesn't want worship. He doesn't want respect. He's simply teaching us how to worship and respect the Supreme Lord. But those who are protesting, such as this crazy fellow, Rabindra Swarup, he didn't want Prabhupada in between himself and Krishna. But what did he know of Krishna without Srila Prabhupada? Simply a crazy fellow. Suddenly, Rabindra's tears were gone. He jumped up, dejectedly stood, hesitating for a moment, and then hurried out the door, banging it behind him. That was his the finale of the big drama that he had caused here. Rabindra Swarup's dramatic exit from Krishna consciousness shocked the devotees. Prabhupada sat still and continued speaking to them gravely, asking them to stick together and push on the movement for their own benefit and for others. Whatever they had learned, he said, they should repeat. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were part of a preaching mission, a movement. They were together, not just for good times and good vibrations. They had a loving obligation to Swamiji and Krishna. So at this time also, in America, because of the counterculture that had developed amongst the youth at that time, they were born to parents who had survived World War II. America had won the war. It was an affluent country. And these young boys and girls who Prabhupada was attracting, they all came from well-to-do families. They had good educations. They were good-looking. So many good qualities about them. So some of them were just taking part in Krishna consciousness because it was a fun thing to do. Chanting and dancing and nice feasting on anytime you wanted, you can get free food. But with Prabhupada's seriousness now, they were realizing they might never see Prabhupada again. And what Prabhupada had actually done was started a movement. Now the word movement also was a dangerous word amongst the hippies, that you had to be conformed to something. Rules, regulations, someone superior to you, an authority. They were rejecting all of that. But they didn't reject Srila Prabhupada, because Prabhupada started a movement. Where were they moving to? They were moving out of the material world, which is what they wanted. They didn't want the materialism anymore. Back to the spiritual world. And he was giving them a glimpse through this chanting of Hare Krishna and this new lifestyle of Krishna consciousness. So therefore, Prabhupada, although these words are completely taboo amongst the hippies, movements, authorities, discipline, they were all accepting that because they trusted Srila Prabhupada, that he knew something that they didn't know, and he was going to take them successfully back to the spiritual world. Prabhupada returned to his apartment, which soon became chaotic. It was late. Many people wanted initiation. Mukunda, Jayananda, and other temple leaders tried to determine which candidates were sincere. They selected candidates, half a dozen at a time, and allowed them into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat behind his little desk, chanted on each person's beads, and returned them, giving each person a spiritual name. So this is, again, when Prabhupada was personally choosing the names. Later, when Krishna consciousness burgeoned and Prabhupada wasn't able to even personally meet his disciples at the time of initiation, he would have his secretaries choose the names of the devotees. Sometimes he would even have his secretary or the person close to them, the GBC who was traveling with him, they would chant on the beads. And then Prabhupada eventually surrendered to giving initiation through the mail. And even second initiations were done by a cassette tape, because normally in second initiation, when you receive the Gayatri Mantra, the spiritual master has to repeat one word at a time into the ear of the disciple. And you have to be there. But Prabhupada couldn't be all over the world at one time. And so many people wanted initiation from Srila Prabhupada. So he developed a system, virtual, that he was giving initiations by mail, by cassette tape. And in that way, the movement, although he couldn't be so many places at one time, the movement was burgeoning all over the world. Kirtananda requested him to stop. Further initiations could be done through the mail. But Prabhupada said he would continue initiating whoever was present. No one could stop Srila Prabhupada. Mukunda and Jayananda set priorities. Some persons had been waiting months to be initiated and were obviously sincere. Others would have to be turned away. John Carter. At the end of the lecture, I was sure that I wanted to be initiated. And even though there was some talk of being initiated by mail, I knew I wanted to have that personal connection with my spiritual master and be personally initiated by him, personally accepted. I ran up to Mukunda and said, "How many are on the list? I would like to get on the list." He said, Mukunda said, "Well, Swamiji isn't really taking them in any particular order. We're just going to try to pick out the most sincere people." "Please put my name on the list," I said. "I'm really sincere. I really want to get initiated." So he put me down and took the list up to Swamiji. And Swamiji began calling for people one by one. After the third person, when my name wasn't called, I became a little worried. Then after the fourth person, I was really sitting on edge. Then when he called the fifth person, and it wasn't me, I was totally destroyed. I felt, oh, he's going to India, and then he's going back to Krishna. I just took my chance. This is it. There's no use in me living anymore. So this is how sentimental some of these new devotees were. They were ready to give up their life if Prabhupada didn't personally initiate them. I was trying to make it to the coat rack and get my coat and get out before anyone could see me crying. I hadn't started crying, but I could tell it was coming. A couple of people patted me on the back and said, "It's all right. He can write you a letter and tell you your name." All I could think was, yeah, the way he was talking tonight, it might never happen. I could barely stand up. I went outside and started walking across the parking lot toward Golden Gate Park. I was kind of heading towards the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought, I'll just jump off. No understanding of the philosophy. I hadn't been there long enough to understand that if you commit suicide, you have to become a ghost. I just figured my life was useless. I got about halfway across the parking lot when the idea struck me. What if he decided to take one more and I was out here somewhere? The thought filled me with so much hope that I turned around and ran back to the temple. And just as I walked in the front of the temple, Janaki ran down and said, "He'll take one more." And she grabbed somebody else and ran up the stairs. I felt my knees start to collapse and tears came jutting out of my eyes. Harsharani was standing there, and she grabbed me by the arm and said, "Come with me." Later, Harsharani and Jivananda, this person, they got married, by the way. She raced up the stairs, pulling me to the top, and burst into Swamiji's room without even knocking. Swamiji looked up with amazement. She said, "Swamiji, you have to initiate this boy." I was just bawling, and Swamiji began to laugh. He said, "It's all right, don't cry. Everything will be all right." He chanted all my beads and gave me the name Jivananda. He went on to become the Sankirtan leader in San Francisco. The next morning, Prabhupada had to leave his affectionate followers. Several cars filled with devotees accompanied him to the San Francisco airport. Nandarani, you remember Nandarani and Dayananda, they joined a few months earlier. Some were sincere and some were crying because it was appropriate to cry when the spiritual master leaves. Actually, none of us really knew much about what the spiritual master was. Janaki mischievously stole the ticket. See the ticket in her hand. And passport from Prabhupada's hand. "Now you can't go," she said. "That's all right," he smiled. "I already have my boarding ticket. I am Indian. They will let me into my own country." Janaki was such a special devotee. She was Prabhupada's first female initiated disciple, and her younger sister is Jamuna. Prabhupada turned to his adoring followers gathered close around him at the boarding gate. "Actually, I have only one desire, and whoever does this will please me very much. Now I have a temple in New York, in Montreal, and a temple in San Francisco. So in New York, Brahmananda was the temple president, and Montreal, a devotee, initiated devotee named Janardhan, he went to Montreal and opened a temple. And here in San Francisco, there was Jayananda, Haridas, Mukunda. A lot of the original disciples were there running it. But I do not have any temple in Los Angeles." He told them to remain in Krishna consciousness and to please preach. So this was Prabhupada's, his cue, that now I have 3 temples, and now I want a temple in Los Angeles also. So eventually Dayananda and Nandarani, they immediately went to Los Angeles and started a temple there. They watched as he turned and walked through the gate, his cane in one hand, boarding pass in the other. So you have behind Prabhupada there Mukunda, Shamsundar, and Janaki. In New York, there was hardly time for sadness. Prabhupada telegraphed Sri Krishna Pandit, that was when Prabhupada was living in Delhi to do his printing work. He stayed at Chippiwada at a Radha Krishna temple. And Sri Krishna Pandit, he was in charge of that temple, who had given Prabhupada the whole upper floor of the temple to reside. So now Prabhupada sent a telegraph. In those days, we didn't have telegraph on our phones. We had real telegrams that we had to send. So Prabhupada telegraphed Sri Krishna Pandit that his arrival in Delhi would be on July 24th at 7:30 a.m. And that Sri Krishna Pandit should prepare Prabhupada's quarters at the Chippiwada temple. In the telegram, Prabhupada mentioned his intention to consult a physician in Delhi and then go to Vrindavan. He was anxious to return to Vrindavan. So not only for spiritual purposes, Prabhupada wanted to return to Vrindavan in case he would leave his body, but for the son and for the fact that there were good Ayurvedic physicians there as well. So he would see a doctor in Delhi, and then as soon as he could, he would go to Vrindavan. So Prabhupada had written earlier to Krishna Pandit. I'm just going to read this letter because you can see that even in Prabhupada's illness, when he was weak and he had to recover, he had to concentrate on his own health, he had to deal with so many problems even then in the society. My dear Sri Krishna Pandit, kindly accept my greetings. I am very much thankful to you for your letter dated June 15, 1967. This was written on the 27th. Your prayers to Lord Krishna are heard by the Lord, and by his grace I'm getting improved in health day by day. Your suggestion to return to India is welcome. As soon as I get a little strength, I must return to India. I also thank your son-in-law, Yog Raj Sharma, for his suggestion. As you have not received the gramophone record as yet, I guess it has been taken away by somebody. So in those days, the post in India was horrendous. You never knew if you were going to get a letter, money, anything that you sent, unless it was sent by registered, and it was registered with acknowledgement due. There was a little card. You had to sign it to prove that you actually received the registered letter. They've stopped all that now. Now they have speed post. Therefore, I have advised my students to send another one by registered post. With that record was a check for 50 rupees 50. Check number in your favor. So you go to the Bank of Baroda, Chandi Chowk, Delhi, and stop the payment by showing this letter. And upon hearing from you, I shall arrange for sending you cash from here. Your former letter was properly replied from here. I request you to see Messrs. S.S. Brijbasi Company at Fatehpuri. So even today, actually the main office of Brijbasi Prince is in Mathura here. They had a big printing press and so many buildings. Brijbasi, the printers were very, very popular at that time. Beautiful G.L. Sharma and many other very famous artists doing devotional artwork. So Prabhupada would have those prints sent to America and put up in the temples. Krishna with a calf and Krishna with Radharani. So many different beautiful devotional paintings that we would have in all of the temples. We sent them an order for pictures and $100, but they are silent. Kindly inquire what is the fate of the money and the order. My blessings for your wife and children. Hope you are well, and thanking you once again. So Srila Prabhupada, not only was he losing money trying to do things through the post, but he was trying to get his books printed, distance printing. He had sent the manuscript. He had sent $2,000 to the Radha Press. Nothing happened. So he was very concerned. It just wasn't working out between India and America. So he had all of these loose ends that he had to tie up monetarily when he got back to India. Where was his money? Where were the books? Where were the paintings? Everything. Everything that he was sending, there was no response, just silence. The day before his departure, Prabhupada wrote to Sumati Morarji. In reply to his last letter, she had agreed to provide free steamship passage to India for him, but not for his disciples. As I had arranged for your passage to America, she had written, I think it is my duty to see that you return back to India safely, more so due to your indifferent health. But she would not allow free passage for any disciples. So later, Sumati Morarji softened, and when two devotees, because the American devotees in particular were being targeted by the government because there wasn't a good relationship between America and India at the time. America was pro-Palestine, India was pro-Russia, and there was a Cold War going on. So some of the Americans would suddenly get notices they had to leave the country, where to go, no money. So at one point, Sumati Morarji did allow 2 devotees to go on their boat, and that was Naranarayan and Dina Dayadri. But because of whatever happened on that boat trip, Sumati Morarji said, never again. No more disciples can go for free on my boats. So she did soften up eventually. On July 20th, Prabhupada wrote, I am feeling too much to return to Vrindavan. Prabhupada wrote to Sumati Morarji, to the lotus feet of Vrindavan Bihari, Lord Krishna. And therefore I have decided to return to India immediately. I would have liked to return via sea, as you have so kindly offered me passage in your letter, but in my precarious state of health, that is not possible. So by the mercy of Krishna, and through one friend here, somehow or other, I have received air passage, and I am expecting to leave here for New Delhi on Saturday next, reaching the Palam airport on the 24th instant at 7:30 a.m. From there, I shall proceed to Vrindavan after a few days' rest in Delhi. So, Sumati Morarji, Srila Prabhupada called her, he was the father of ISKCON. He's our father, our grandfather. And Prabhupada called her the mother of ISKCON because she assisted Prabhupada so much before he went to America. She printed one of his volumes, paid for the whole printing of one of his volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam. She gave him residence in Bombay. She arranged for all of his legal papers to be done. And she gave him free passage to America. Very helpful. So, and then the correspondence between Srila Prabhupada and Sumati Morarji went on for those 2 years. She was always encouraging Prabhupada, don't come back until you have some success. So with that encouragement, Prabhupada was staying, extending his visa as long as possible. And here again, he's speaking in a very intimate way to Srimati Morarji through his letter, how he just wants to come back to Vrindavan. Continuation of his letter to her. I can understand that at present you cannot allow free passage to my disciples. But if you don't do so, at least in the near future, then my mission will be half finished or failure. I am just enclosing one letter of appreciation for one of my principal students, Bruce Scharf, that's Brahmananda, from Professor Davis Heron, and another from Professor Roberts of New York University. So Brahmananda, he was a graduate of NYU, New York University, and he did his thesis on Bhagavad-Gita, one of his papers. And afterwards, he accepted a lot of responsibility for Srila Prabhupada up until his last breath. He became the first temple president. This is a picture, Brahmananda and Gargamuni, they found after 26 Second Avenue, although they messed up terribly trying to get that beautiful big brownstone house, losing $1,000, etc., and Prabhupada had to step in and threaten legally. Prabhupada saved the day. But they did get a new temple just down the street at 61 Second Avenue. So this is Brahmananda when he still was carrying on as temple president there at 61 Second Avenue. I think these letters will convince you how much my movement of Krishna consciousness is taking ground in the Western world. The holy name of Hare Krishna is now being chanted not only in this country, but also in England, Holland, and Mexico that I know of. Because Prabhupada's followers, they would come to the New York temple, they would come to the San Francisco temple, and then they would go back to their countries, and they would start the chanting of Hare Krishna also. It may even be more widespread. I have sent you one gramophone record, which I hope you may have received by this time. You will enjoy to learn how Krishna's holy name is being appreciated by the Western world. Achyutananda, now Achyutananda Prabhu, he was also one of the first disciples of Srila Prabhupada, just a young boy when he joined, very attached to Srila Prabhupada. When Achyutananda heard that Prabhupada was going back to India, he immediately wanted to go with Srila Prabhupada, and he did eventually. He went 1 month later and stayed in India for many, many years after that. He learned Bengali, he learned Hindi, he learned he lived with the Gaudiya Math, but Prabhupada at that time instructed him to. He learned all of the different beautiful mridangas and bhajans and everything from the devotees at Gaudiya Math. So now Achyutananda told Prabhupada he wanted to go to India to study intensively, gather experiences, and become attached to Krishna. He had heard Prabhupada say that one could become more Krishna conscious in 2 days in Vrindavan than in 10 years in America. So eventually Achyutananda, he came back to America, and he wrote a wonderful book called Blazing Sadhus about his experiences with Srila Prabhupada. And you'll find some really amazing quotations there that you won't find anywhere else that Prabhupada shared with him. And this is one of those. 2 days in Vrindavan, you can make more advancement than 10 years in America. Do you think I'll be able to go? Achyutananda asked. Rest assured, Prabhupada told him, we will meet again in Braja. So this is Prabhupada's original room at the Radha Damodar temple. This is his sitting room. The doors are open. There's a veranda, and you can see there, that's the door to Prabhupada's kitchen. So when Prabhupada did come back to Vrindavan, again he stayed in his room there, and all of the devotees stayed nearby, either on the roof of the Radha Damodar temple, or they stayed nearby at Keshigat. Devotees had been asking Satyarup to transfer his civil service job to Boston and open a Krishna conscious center there. Now, why Boston? Boston was it's on the East Coast, and it's one of the most historical cities in America, where it was originally the capital of America after the Revolution. And there are many, many colleges there. Harvard, MIT, Boston University. And wherever there are colleges, naturally it means there are young men and women. And young men and women are the ones who would be joining to understand the philosophy. So the next place the devotees wanted to open a temple would be Boston. And eventually that happened. The ISKCON press was started there. Many, many devotees joined there in Boston. We'll come to that in the later volumes. They had also asked Rupanuga to do the same in Buffalo. There was a big university there. And when Rupanuga finally went there with his wife, Kalindi, and his little son, Akendra, they made so many devotees there. He had a yoga class in the university, and he was just churning out devotees from that yoga class, all getting initiated. So Prahladananda, Jagadish, Purijan, Bhagavan, Krishna Bhamini, Lakshmi Moni, so many devotees were made, Ayodhyapati, Bibi Govinda Maharaj. So many devotees were made from that Buffalo temple and from the Boston temple also. Satyarup and Rupanuga approached Prabhupada. So this is Rupanuga here, holding Prabhupada's cooker, to find out what he wanted. He became very pleased. Subal was going to open a center in Santa Fe. Santa Fe is near Mexico, in New Mexico. Santa Fe, Arizona. Arizona or New Mexico, somewhere down in the south of America. And it was another big center where a lot of hippies congregated. So that was also a very nice temple that Prabhupada visited that Subal opened, he said. and Dayananda was going to Los Angeles. Hare Krishna mantra is like a big cannon, he told them. Go and sound this cannon so everyone can hear it, and it will drive away Maya. The devotees wanted to ask, but what if you don't return? They were fearful. What if Krishna kept Swamiji in Vrindavan? What if Swamiji never returned? How could they survive against Maya? But Swamiji had already assured them that whatever Krishna consciousness he had given them would be enough, even if he never returned. Now, of course, Prabhupada did return, but Prabhupada, in his early stage, before he went to America, he so carefully prepared his Srimad Bhagavatam volumes that the entire life, history, and teachings of Lord Chaitanya were there in the introduction, and he put the whole Krishna conscious philosophy within those first 3 volumes that the devotees could carry on the movement with. Just 30 minutes before he had to leave the airport, Prabhupada sat in his room chanting on the beads of a girl who had asked to be initiated. Then, as he had done many times before, he left his apartment, went downstairs, crossed the courtyard, and entered the storefront. Sitting on the old carpet, he spoke quietly and personally. I may be going, but Guru Maharaj and Bhakti Vinod are here, because Jadharani had painted these nice paintings that were on the walls now. He looked toward the paintings of his spiritual master and Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I have asked them to kindly take care of all of you, my spiritual children. The grandfather always takes care of the children much better than the father. So do not fear. There is no question of separation. The sound vibration fixes us up together, even though the material body may not be there. What do we care for this material body? Just go on chanting Hare Krishna, and we will be packed up together. You will be chanting here, I will be chanting there, and this vibration will circulate around this planet. This is the Parikrama Marg, the white sands, no cars. No cars were in Vrindavan. There were 2 cars in Vrindavan. Beautiful white soft sands, and when the rains came, everything would be flooded. The Jamuna would come back again to the Ghats there. So this is just near the Radha Damodar temple. Several devotees rode with Prabhupada in the taxi. Brahmananda in the front with the driver, Rai Ram, and Kirtanananda in the back beside their spiritual master. When Kirtanananda sees Vrindavan, Prabhupada said, he will not be able to understand how I could have left that place and come to this place. It is so nice. It was pristine, clear, clean. The sands, when you would walk on the sands of the parikrama, and even here at the temple, right outside our gate, everything was white sands, Raman Reti. When you walked, the bottom of your feet would turn white from the sands, not black. And the water, the Jamuna water was so pure, we would drink right from the river. That's how wonderful it was. There are no motor cars there like here, rushing, whoosh, whoosh, and smelling. Only there is Hare Krishna. Everybody always chanting. Thousands and thousands of temples. I will show you, Kirtanananda. We will walk all about there, and I will show you. Brahmananda began to cry, and Prabhupada patted him on the back. I can understand that you are feeling separation, he said. I am feeling for my Guru Maharaj. I think this is what Krishna desires. You may be coming there to me and be training up, and we will spread this movement all over the world. So many times after Srila Prabhupada came back to Vrindavan, and he would always come back to Vrindavan because this is his eternal home, his residence, he would call Brahmananda to be his secretary. Brahmananda was Prabhupada's favorite secretary. Even at the end, the last days, Prabhupada wanted Brahmananda to be the secretary, but every time Brahmananda left his zone, the whole zone of Africa, so many countries in Africa, so many people to preach to, every time he left and became Prabhupada's secretary, all of the development that he had made would just disintegrate. So he explained that to Prabhupada at the end. Though Prabhupada called him, wanted him to come to Vrindavan, be his secretary, Brahmananda chose rather to remain in Africa and continue with the preaching there. So just at the very end, Brahmananda came and was with Prabhupada, 1977. You may be coming there to me and be training up, and we will spread this movement all over the world. Rairam, you will go to England. Brahmananda, you want to go to Japan or Russia? That's all right. Eventually, Prabhupada sent Brahmananda to Pakistan and then to Africa. The devotees converged on the Air India waiting room near a crowded cocktail lounge. Wearing a sweater, his chadar folded neatly over one shoulder, Prabhupada sat in a chair. His disciples sat as closely as possible around his feet. He held an umbrella, just as when he had first come alone to New York, almost 2 years ago. Although exhausted, he was smiling. Prabhupada noted a mural of Indian women carrying large jars on their heads. It's the water pots. And he called the name of a young girl who had recently gone with her husband, Hansaduta, to join the ISKCON Center in Montreal. Himavati, would you like to go to India and learn to carry this water pot like the Indian women? So yes, Himavati, this picture is when Prabhupada started the World Sankirtan Party. He called some of his senior disciples from all over, about 40, 50 disciples went with Prabhupada, and Himavati and Hansaduta were part of that party. And Himavati stayed here afterwards. Her husband took sannyas, and she lived here very austerely, just around the corner here, for many years. Yes, she said, I'll go. Yes, Srila Prabhupada said, someday we will all go. Kirtananda was carrying a portable battery-operated phonograph and 2 copies of the Hare Krishna mantra record. Kirtananda, Prabhupada asked, why not play the record? They will enjoy. Kirtananda played the record very softly, its sound catching the attention of people in the cocktail lounge. Make it a little louder, Prabhupada asked, and Kirtananda increased the volume. Prabhupada began nodding his head, keeping time. Soon the devotees began humming along with the record, and then quietly singing, until gradually they were singing loudly. Kirtananda, Brahmananda, and other devotees began to cry. So we'll have to continue next week. It's past time. We've only made it to the airport today. Hare Krishna. Jai.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.